All right, let's jump right into a question the Scottish legal system has to answer pretty much every single day. How do you actually put a price on pain?
I mean, it sounds impossible, doesn't it? When an accident takes away your ability to work or to play with your kids or just to live a normal day without pain, how can it check, possibly make up for that? Well, believe it or not, the law has a system for this, and that's exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, first things first, there's a key word you need to know: solatium. Now, I know it's a Latin term, sounds a little fancy, but what it describes is something every injured person understands immediately. It's the legal term for compensation that covers what an injury does to you as a person, way beyond just lost wages or medical bills. So here's our game plan. We'll start with that core question about the price of pain. We'll look at the big legal idea behind it all, and then explore the actual guidelines they use. We'll see why doctors are so incredibly important in this. Then we'll break down exactly how that human cost is calculated. And finally, you'll see why this is a structured system, not just some random guess. So let's start with that central challenge: the price of pain. Now, to understand how this whole system works, you first have to get the philosophy that it's all built on, and that's called the principle of repair. And right at the heart of this principle is another one of those fancy legal ideas: restitutio in integrum. It just means full restitution. Look, the law isn't naive. It knows money can't magically heal a shattered bone or erase months of suffering. But what it can do is formally acknowledge that loss. It provides financial recognition for that human cost. And that's really the ultimate goal. Okay, so if that's the goal, how do they actually get to a number? Well, the process isn't arbitrary. In fact, it starts with a key reference document, a guideline for injuries. This is the starting point for pretty much every case. It's a huge book called the Judicial College Guidelines, and you can really think of it as a detailed catalog or even a pricing guide for almost every type of physical and psychological injury you can possibly imagine. Using these guidelines is a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, you identify the exact type of injury, let's say a knee injury. Second, you have to determine its severity. Is it minor, moderate, or severe? And then third, you find the matching compensation bracket, or range, right there in the book. And you can see right here just how different those brackets can be. A moderate knee injury might fall into a range in the tens of thousands of pounds. But a severe traumatic brain injury, that could push the compensation bracket well into the hundreds of thousands. The guidelines are what provide that crucial financial ballpark. But a ballpark figure isn't the final number. So where exactly within that big range does a specific case fall? Well, that brings us to what is arguably the most critical element of the entire calculation: the doctor's deciding role. You see, you might think this big book of guidelines is the final answer. I mean, it sets out all the ranges after all, but on its own, it's just that, a book. Because it's the medical report that writes the real story. An independent medical expert's report is the true foundation of any compensation figure. It's the document that translates a person's experience of injury into the hard facts and figures that the legal system actually needs to work with. So what's in this critical report? Well, it covers the diagnosis, the severity, the impact on daily life, and the treatment required. But the real key factor here, the one that often carries the most weight, is the prognosis. This long-term outlook is just so significant because it helps determine whether we're talking about a temporary disruption or a permanent, life-altering change. So now that we have the medical facts, the system can finally begin calculating the human cost. This is where we break down what that term solatium is actually made of. The first component is the most obvious one: pain. This covers the purely physical pain and discomfort someone has experienced, from the moment of the accident through recovery and including any chronic pain that might just stick around. It looks at how intense the pain is and, of course, for how long it lasts. The second component is suffering, and this is different from pain. This goes beyond the physical. It's about the emotional and psychological toll, the anxiety, the distress from a long recovery, the sheer frustration of not being able to do things you once just took for granted. And the third component, loss of amenity, is maybe the most personal of all. This is about what the injury has taken away from your specific life. If you're a passionate musician and now you can no longer play your instrument, that's a significant loss of amenity. If you can't garden, or play a sport, or even just manage simple daily tasks, that's all part of this calculation. And this quote just brings it all home. A parent who can no longer lift their own child because of an injury, that is a profound loss of amenity. It's an impact that goes so far beyond the physical pain itself, and the system is designed to recognize that very human loss. So, what happens if you have more than one injury? You might think you just add the values for each one together, but that's actually not how it works. Instead of just stacking them up, the law uses a more holistic approach. It identifies the primary injury, values that, and then adds an uplift for the others. The result is a single global award that reflects the combined impact on you as a whole person.
Which brings us to our final thought. After seeing all these different pieces, one thing becomes crystal clear. This is a system, not a guess.
So the bottom line is this: compensation for pain and suffering in Scotland is not some subjective or arbitrary number just pulled out of thin air. It's a methodical calculation. It starts with medical evidence, applies that evidence to establish guidelines, and produces a figure that is the legal system's absolute best attempt to put a price on the human cost of an injury.
And yet, that leaves us with one final, thought-provoking question. This system is designed to provide a figure, to be as fair and objective as possible. But it forces us to confront a much deeper truth. What really is the value of a life without pain? That's something to really think about.